All right, welcome back to the Fronczak Files. Last episode, we started this journey. It's a journey that's full of twists and turns, and if you missed it, don't start this one. Go back and listen to the first one. Kind of take that ride. You have to really take it from the beginning. So, Tracy, what are we going to talk about this episode in the Abandonment?
We left off at the phone call, if I remember correctly. We sort of left our listeners hanging.
All right, so in this episode, the Abandonment, the Fronczaks had their child kidnapped from Michael Reese Hospital back in 1964. This is almost 2 years later, right? 2 years came and went. No word on their missing baby. And Dora and Chester decided, you know what? We've got to start living our lives. We've got to move forward. So Dora became pregnant. And they thought, you know what? We're going to keep hoping that our child comes back, but we can't just stop living. And all of a sudden, they got a phone call.
So you said this was 2 years later?
Almost 2 years later. Yeah.
So they had like Paul's birthday came and went, holidays came and went. Did your parents feel like there was still hope, even though all of these milestones were passing them by and no baby?
That's a great question. I want to say my mom, Dora, never gave up hope. Chester, I think he was more of a realist. He's like, it's been over 2 years. I think we need to start moving forward. They had just bought a house. She was pregnant with Dave. And I think he was ready for that next chapter. And of course, just like everything else in life, just when you think it's calm, all of a sudden this whole world opens up. They get a phone call. We think we found your child. So that's it's something. People say that this could be a Lifetime movie or something, but no one would believe it, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, sometimes you probably have trouble believing it, that this is your story.
I'm not even sure I do at this point. But I have all this hard proof saying that it is true, right? Yeah.
Sure. The papers in front of you tell you, this is my story.
Yeah, so I'm sticking to it.
Wild. And, thinking about your parents again, getting that phone call out of the blue, thinking their life was on track. They've got these plans, this new baby coming, and all of this sadness hopefully will lift from them. And then there's almost yanked right back into the story again.
Yeah. It's funny, like over the years, when I first found out about this, it never really affected me. It's like I'm looking at someone else's life. I'm more of a detective, just piecing everything together, trying to make a timeline and make it, find out how it actually fits together. But now I'm thinking more in terms of feelings of the people involved. And for Dora and Chester to all of a sudden get that phone call after all this time of thinking, we hope that we get our child back, but we're not really sure. And then, it's like anything else in life. If you start thinking about it, you can start adjusting towards it and making it feel like, okay, this is normal. And then you get a phone call like that, and then your whole world gets thrown into just a craziness again. And you start thinking, oh my God, what if this is our child? Now we have to worry about this. We have to go to New Jersey. We have to, how are we even going to realize if it's our child? We saw our baby for maybe all in all, maybe an hour. Over 2 years ago.
And 2 years have gone by. Yeah. Kids aren't really recognizable from their baby picture to their toddler pictures. They change so much.
Every 6 months, it seems like there's a huge change.
Yeah. And you said New Jersey.
New Jersey, of all places, right?
Yes.
You want to set the tone of what's happening in the East Coast at that time?
Well, if we're looking at, 2 years or so past Paul's birthday, we're looking at 1965. The country's still in flux. There's still all sorts of social issues going on, adjusting to all of the new rules, the new freedoms. Country's going through a lot of growing pains. And it was such a different time from what I've read about it. Yeah. And that, it seemed like a much more innocent time for everyone in the country. People just didn't think about safety like they do now. It was the world was a safer place, it seemed. But I think when you look below the surface, you realize, no, it was just as bad then as it is now.
So let's go back to that safety issue. So the circumstances of how Paul, was abandoned are pretty crazy, right? It was July 2nd, 1965. in Newark, New Jersey, on the streets of Cedar and Broad Street, which ironically is now a Nike store. I had the pleasure of going there. I was actually there with Barbara Walters. We were shooting a 2020 episode. Back when I was abandoned there, the area was known as Ladies Mile. This is like one of the hottest shopping centers outside of Manhattan. This place was so trendy that they even had a subway platform going right into the store. So people from all the surrounding areas could just jump on a train, go to McCrory's, because that's where I was abandoned, outside of McCrory's variety store. So whoever left me there, they actually left me there, I think it was 3 p.m, in a brand new stroller, in a brand new blue suit, and I was sporting a nice, fresh black eye, which is always nice when you see an abandoned child with a black eye.
You had a black eye?
I had a black eye, yeah. It was Jersey. I'm kidding. That was a bad joke.
Rough
that
and
was
tumble,
a bad
right?
joke. Yeah, I take that back. I love Jersey. I'll fix that in post. And I think I had a cold. So I had a bad cold, and I was just left outside. So we're talking about safety issues. Like today, you would never leave a child alone anywhere for a few minutes.
No way. I mean, no one would leave their kid outside of a store while they go inside to even shop for 60 seconds. That's not going to happen.
Alone.
And you said this was July as well. So it's humid, it's hot, and you've been left outside on the sidewalk.
Not only that, it's a few days before the holiday, right? July 2nd, July 4th it's a big deal, right? So it
seems like that they were hoping that you would be found. It sounds like it's a busy place. Like there's a lot of people coming and going, that someone would notice this baby on the sidewalk.
Absolutely. And I think that was the whole MO for this whole thing. They needed to get rid of the baby, but they wanted to make sure the baby was okay. I mean, a brand new stroller, pretty expensive.
Those two things don't really go together, do they?
No,
they want to get rid of this baby, but also wanted to keep him safe.
Yeah,
all right.
New stroller, new suit, right? Fresh black eye, right? These are important things when you're going to abandon a child outside of McCrory's.
Sure.
And
check all the boxes.
So I was there for about 2 hours before someone dropped a dime and called the cops and said there's an abandoned baby out here in a stroller. So the cops came, they picked me up, they took me to the police station, and then they realized that I had a black eye and a cold, so they took me to Newark Hospital. And that's when the story really takes off, right? You would think an abandoned child outside of a fancy store like that, someone would claim the baby immediately, right? Oh my gosh, I was shopping and I forgot about my child outside. So it was Detective Farrell out of the Newark police. He started running ads, for anyone want to claim this missing child that we found outside of McCrory's on Newark and Broad Street and Cedar Street. And he thought it'd be a slam dunk. I think he even said, by later tonight, we're going to have this baby back at home.
That just makes logical sense, that someone should be panicking, that they, when the audience listens to that story and hears, I forgot my baby was outside on the sidewalk. Well, people forget their kids are in their car these days. Like that is a thing. And so it's certainly possible someone could have parked you there and then walked away and then went, oh God, I forgot to grab my kid.
I mean, I hate to use this analogy, but I keep thinking of Home Alone. When all the parents are on the plane and they're like, oh, we're so excited to go on our trip. We got everything, right? Where's Kevin?
Yeah.
Yeah. So where's...
You're right. It happens. Yeah. So it doesn't seem like a far leap, really, for the Detective Farrell to think, put a picture out there and someone's going to come looking for this baby.
Yeah. I mean, who wouldn't want to claim a baby in a brand new stroller with a blue suit? Yeah.
Sure. And I've seen the pictures. You're adorable.
Thank you.
Who wouldn't
Much too kind.
Who wouldn't want to claim you?
I feel the same way, right? Matter of fact, if I went there right now and sat in a stroller, I bet somebody would claim me.
I bet you it is New Jersey.
I don't know, because when I was there with Barbara Walters, she wanted to walk around, and the producers are like, you can't walk around this area because there's people doing heroin right there. So it was a much different area than it was back then. Back then it was Ladies Mile, all the big time shoppers around the area. And
what I read about that was, people were coming from all over the country to shop there. That was not just for the locals. They, just like now they go to Manhattan to shop. They were going to Jersey.
Yeah. And they said Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays were the busiest time in that area. Just thousands and thousands of people. So that set off this police campaign to try to find, after I was in the hospital for, I think, about a week because I had a cold I couldn't shake. And then they decided, well, no one's claiming this child, so we need to put him into foster care. So that's when they reached out to the best foster house in that area in Watchung, New Jersey, that was run by Fred and Claire Eckert and their daughter Janet. So I think they at most they had about 10 children at any given time.
That's a lot of children to be fostering. That's a lot of children in any place at one time.
It is, yeah. And they were super nice people. I over the years, I've got to actually meet Janet. Janet actually reached out to me when I started this whole journey and said, "You are our Scott." So I was placed with them, and I was there so long that they actually named me and they baptized me Scott McKinley. They gave me a birthday of April 15th, which is tax day now. I wonder if it was back then.
All right. I was thinking the same thing.
Tax day. It's crazy.
But that's sort of where you got the tag as a foundling. You had no name, no information, foundling, infant abandoned by its parents to be cared for by others. And that's literally what you were.
Yeah, I was a foundling.
So they gave you a name, they gave you a birthday, they helped give you an identity.
Yeah, so I was basically a foundling. I was 22 pounds, 30 inches, and the police estimated I was about 14 months old. And
well, for a 14-month-old, that's on the small side for sure, as far as physical development. Any information on how you were you talking? Were you saying words? As far as your mental development.
Yeah, so I didn't get into it. I know nothing about that until later down the road after spending almost a year with the Eckerts.
I'm sure there was a lot to learn in a house full of all those kids. You had to get up to speed real quick.
Yeah, so from what they said, in the beginning, whenever their son-in-law came around, I would cower and kind of like hide in the corner like I was really afraid. So something must have happened with a guy, maybe a younger guy. I had a black eye.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I didn't do it to myself. Yeah.
Sure. Well, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm sure that I had some kind of abuse there that they couldn't explain. But then eventually they said that I came out of my shell and I was super friendly. I became kind of like a leader with the other kids. I always make sure that they were okay. I had a plastic guitar. There's actually a picture on the wall on my murder board here behind me. I was playing drums and I had a little guitar that I carry with me everywhere. So I loved music. It's funny, like reading the letters from Claire. She said I liked anything from Mantovani to Mozart to rock and roll, classic rock, which wasn't classic rock then. It was rock.
Sure. It was, yeah.
It was just rock.
It's not on the retro station at that time. And music permeates through your whole life.
It does. Yeah, I've got a beautiful Rickenbacker right behind me here, which
my
you
do.
favorite bass. I've got a lot of basses, but that's my favorite. Yeah.
So once you were placed with the Eckerts, how long were you there with them?
I was with them almost a year because no one was claiming me.
So the search was still ongoing. The police were still advertising you, still searching for possible parents, sounds like?
What happened was I became part of the Eckert family. Like I really bonded with Fred. Like I would wait for him at the end of the driveway when he come home from work, and I carry his lunchbox in. And they wanted to adopt me. Like they really wanted me to be part of the family. But then the FBI reached out to them and said, "We think this is a kidnapped child from Chicago." And it all started when Detective Farrell remembered the Fronczak kidnapping. And he saw pictures, and he reached out to Otto from the Chicago PD and asked for the file. And he had this idea that I was the actual kidnapped child from Chicago. And that was still an ongoing case. That was a hot case, right? I mean, they really wanted to solve that because it was bad. So the Chicago PD, the FBI, and the Newark police, they all got together and started talking, and they thought, I think that this is the Fronczak child. So they started testing me. They took blood tests. They took a mold of my ear because the picture of Paul, which is in the newspaper behind me, that's the only picture we ever had of him. But his ear was prominent. So they felt confident enough that they could see the bumps and the ridges, and that could be used as a form of ID.
Yeah, I've read about that. That there was this idea that like fingerprints, ears were unique to everybody, and of course now we know that's not true. But at the time, with the technology they had, yeah, and if the baby wasn't footprinted, fingerprinted, you couldn't compare any of that.
Could you imagine watching an episode of CSI and they solve this case shaped up based on someone's ear? You never watch that show
and
again.
people be laughing
Yeah,
at that.
This is horrible.
No.
God, I'm not going to believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they believe it, So they
Sure, yeah.
yeah, so they decided that I was the Fronczak child. So then they had to test me. They started doing psych tests and things for quite a while. And then they finally reached out. I think after 10 months, they reached out to the Fronczaks and said, "We think we have your kidnapped child. Do you want to drive out to New Jersey?" And that's when my parents got the phone call. So it's like, once again, sliding doors. All these different things came together. It's like the perfect storm of craziness. So what do? Right? You go, this is a crank call. I'm not going to listen to it.
Sure, I'm sure they've gotten crank calls through this whole process. We talked about the ransom call. Like, how do they distinguish what's real and what isn't? At some point in time, you just believe that all of it is not real.
Yeah, unless you're someone like me who believes that leave no stone unturned. Check out every lead, every tip that you get, because you never know that one that you thought you just glance over might be the one that could help you.
Yeah.
So my parents did what any parent would do. They got in the car and they drove to New Jersey in the hopes of IDing their long-lost kidnapped child.
I can't even imagine what they talk about on that trip. Like, what's the conversation, what the feelings are, and just it could go so many different ways, right?
If they even talked at all. I would love to.
How traumatic. It's just re-traumatizing them in a lot of ways after it seemed like they were so close to moving on with their life. And
over 2 years, right?
Then to get yanked back. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I'm sure Dora kept reliving that kidnapping when she handed Paul over. You're carrying all that inside you. So when they finally get to New Jersey, Janet had told me Janet was the daughter of the Eckerts. She was in high school when I was put into their foster care. She said that they weren't allowed to see the Fronczaks. They were put in a room next door to where the Fronczaks were. And then they brought in Scott. And as soon as they brought Scott in, I guess they looked at me and I looked at them, and my mom just screamed out, "Oh my God, that's my baby. That's Paul."
Ugh.
And Janet heard that, and they were crushed, because even though they wanted me to be back with my original family and have that great family life, they wanted to keep me as well. So it was bittersweet.
I'm sure for them that was hard. That they knew they were going to lose you right in that moment, that you were not going to be able to stay with them anymore, and you're going to move on to another new life again. I think it's interesting when I read about your experience with the Eckerts and how they, described you as a little boy, and how gentle and tender you were with the other children at the home, and how you were almost a caregiver to them. And when they would cry, you would stroke their hair and ask them, "Don't cry, don't cry." And then on the flip side of that, you also talked to yourself when you would cry and say, "Don't cry, don't cry." And it makes you wonder where that comes from.
Yeah, because if you start adding up clues, like I was afraid of younger men. And then I would tell myself not to cry. What happened when I cried? Did I get a black eye?
Is that where that black eye came from? Right. And someone gave you those words. Someone gave you that phrase. They said it to you more than once, and you remembered it, and you knew how to apply it to the situation. So it was something that you had been told, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's really sad.
Yeah, but how there's a lot of hope there, though, because here was a child with a heart, despite maybe all of the terrible things that we don't know had happened. You still were a caring human being to your fellow foster kids, and you loved the Eckerts. Clearly, you looked upon them as parents. You still had that ability to open up to people.
Yet, when you put that with the fact that I think I knew like 10 words, it didn't seem like I knew a whole lot because the letters that so the Eckarts actually sent a lot of letters to my parents. They hid it in the suitcase.
Oh,
And I
wow.
didn't know about
What
this
good
until just a
people.
few years ago. My mom actually had a scrapbook full of pictures that the Eckarts sent. They weren't in the pictures because by law they couldn't be, but it was just a
Yeah.
little glimpse of how I was at that stage in my life.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like they have to tell your parents about you because your parents don't know you at all. What are your likes? What are your dislikes? Where are you at developmentally? Where are we at in potty training? Where are we at in speaking? They don't even know their own child. And so the Eckarts had a lot of foresight, it seems like, to be able to give them some information to go
Super
from.
nice people, and the letters, I think I'll put them on the website so you could actually read them. It's, they covered a lot of ground, like my menu, what I ate, my daily routine, my vocabulary, things like that, my behavior, what I like doing, things like that. Because like you said, if when my daughter was born, if I didn't see her for 2 years, I would have no idea how that child is because in 2 years, she was doing so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's like a crash course in getting to know your own child.
Yeah.
How bizarre is that? It's so
I can't even
bizarre.
imagine. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
because like you said, being an RN, you've seen all these things, you understand behavior. So much can happen in 6 months, let alone over 2 years.
And of course, then for your parents too, wondering what's he been through in the time he's been away from us. That unknown, that's a punch to the gut. Ugh,
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I mean, talk about
yeah,
taking a leap of faith, right? Yeah,
absolutely.
that's my son. I haven't seen him for over 2 years. I really have no idea, but so I talked to my mom about that in depth over the last couple of years because we didn't talk about it for, I don't know, 40 years, 50 years, and I finally brought it up, and she started opening up. It's funny, my dad Chester passed away in 2017, and it seems like after he passed away, my mom started becoming more forthcoming with all these things that they went through, and she actually told me how she felt. They were led into that room, and she said the world was watching because this kidnapping was being watched by everybody.
I'd read about like all the testing that they'd put you through, along with thousands of other toddler boys around the same
10,000.
age. That's a crazy number. That's huge, and that's a lot of
Yeah.
testing.
It's a lot of
Was
ears.
this right? Was this a lot like across the country? They were testing toddler boys all
All over
over
the
the
country,
country,
yeah.
seeing if any of them would be a contender for possibly being
Yep.
Paul.
So the FBI agent Marlon Johnson, who ended up being a friend of my parents for a long time, he really took charge of this investigation. They tested 10,000 boys to see if one of them could have been the kidnapped child. They tested using blood, bone, skin, hair, and uh, molds of the ear because everything was based on the shape of Paul's ear from that one hospital photograph. So Tracy, as an RN, how do you feel about those kind of tests?
Well, I'm glad we live in the time that we do because now we just do a little swab in the cheek and we can have all the information we need. Yeah, thinking about toddler boys being poked and prodded and, taking a bone specimen. Ouch, that's horrible. And putting these little kids through all of that just to see if they could come up with the right baby. Traumatic for a toddler and their parent, and who's taking care of them, listening to these babies cry, getting their blood drawn and oh, tearing me apart. That's a knife to the heart
It's
for
very
sure.
X-File-ish for sure. Yeah. Jeez.
Absolutely.
All right.
And that people were thinking at the time, this is cutting edge. This is the information that we need. This is going to tell us what we need to know.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy. So after the Fronczak said, that's our child, all of a sudden they have a family now. So they have to get in the car with me and drive cross country back to Chicago.
I wonder what that car ride was like. The car ride going out. What's the car ride like going back? They've literally went from having no children to having a toddler in their car, not even prepared for
Yeah.
it. Do they have a room ready for you? Do they have furniture? Are they even ready for this? They're not.
I know my mom was extremely happy. I'm sure my dad was happy because, over 2 years of pain and anguish and just, not moving forward, and all of a sudden you have your child back. So, I mean, it's a happy ending. I mean, who could ask for more, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a miracle. No doubt
Yeah,
about it.
definitely a miracle. So I get back to Chicago and they have home movies of me. The first thing they did was have me baptized again. I was already baptized as Scott. So now I'm baptized.
You got your place in heaven all set and waiting for
set.
you then,
Yeah,
don't you?
I do. I do. Yeah, so I was baptized Paul Joseph Fronczak and started living that new life. And I had these really cool home movies of at my aunt and uncle's house, just running around and everyone's watching me because I was, the celebrity. I was the kid that was gone for 2 years, over 2 years, right? And I look at those home movies and it's like I'm not looking at myself. I'm just looking at a movie, another actor playing this child. And it's those thoughts that I think have kept me going all this time because the whole thing is so surreal that you don't really think about it. Like when you read the book, you're like, okay, that's really a crazy story. It's a good story. I like it. But when it's you, it's a completely different feeling. It's like you're looking down at something else from above, right?
Yeah, sort of an out of body kind of thing. Not my life. That's not me. I'm watching someone else's home movies, watching someone else's Christmas morning footage, riding a bike. Oh, look at that kid learning to ride a trike, playing that little guitar. What a cool kid. Wait, that's me.
Yeah. Yeah, so I took over the role as Paul, and everything was cool for a while. I thought, okay, this is my life.
Well, like, what are some of your first memories with your parents?
That's where it gets a little fuzzy. Like, I don't have any memories till I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I went to an elementary school called Oakview, and my mom made me wear this really crazy colored, weird design jacket, and I hated that jacket. I'm like, I'm gonna get beat up in this jacket.
It was the 60s.
Yeah.
That's all we need to say about the fashion at the
But it
time,
was
right?
horrible. But, you think about all the things I could remember, I remember that. And I remember Christmas mornings, Dave would wake me up really early. Dave was my younger brother because after they brought me home, they had just had Dave. So my mom and dad went from having no children to having 2 children, and they moved into a new house. So that was a lot for my mom. She was overwhelmed, to put it lightly.
Oh, I'm sure. Having one new infant is a huge life change. You can attest to it as well. You go from sleeping when you want, eating when you want, picking up and going when you want, to I'm not sleeping at all now, ever again. Am I doing this right? Am I being a good parent? All those anxiety things and hangups we all have about being parents, and times 2 now.
Times 2.
They've got a toddler and an infant.
Yeah.
In just a short period of time.
Yeah, it's crazy. But I remember Dave waking me up on Christmas mornings. It all goes back to Christmas for me, Maybe that's why I love the Polar Express so much.
It's a big holiday for you. A lot of things are sticking in your memory from Christmas.
It's all Christmas. Christmas and crawl spaces. That could be
sounds like another
book.
Yeah. Then you're 3 books in a movie. Oh, there's a goal for you.
Yeah. It's good to have goals. But yeah, I remember growing up with them, and it wasn't really Dora and Chester were amazing parents. They really took care of us, but they weren't like real loving parents.
Like tactile, physical people?
A lot of hugging and, kisses and things like that. And I remember my mom was always cleaning. She was just always cleaning something. And once she cleaned part of the house, Dave and I weren't allowed to play in that area of the house. It was like a museum piece, like I often think of them like the Rockwell paintings, like you see on the plates and things.
Yeah.
But when she cleaned an area, that was not a Rockwell area. That was a museum area. We'd go play in the other areas. But she was constantly cleaning. Anyway, that's just certain childhood memories that I have.
Yeah. And just as an observation from the psychological point of view, people that are obsessively clean and they spend a lot of time cleaning, it can be manifesting a control issue. I need total control over everything that's happening in my life, in my home, in vacuuming obsessively, dusting. It's trying to bring order to chaos. And I'm sure she was feeling a lot of chaos. Her mind had to be just spinning all the time, trying to figure out how she was going to manage all this.
Well,
what she could control was how clean your house was.
She couldn't control someone kidnapping her child, but she could
Right.
definitely control the house being spotless. Yeah.
For sure.
And I remember having like the craziest early curfews. Like all my friends could stay out later and I always had to be home earlier. My parents had to always be able to see where I was. I mean, the kidnapping was a big part of their lives. And even though they didn't talk about it, it came out in actions. And I just remember just having really early curfews, not being able to do a lot of things. They never tell strangers your name because the name would reopen the story again. Because for a long time after I was back, even up to 5 years old, the media was still hounding them every birthday. Because I have an article of them celebrating my 5th birthday, and it was in the newspapers. So they still had all that stigma of the media still just hounding them, which is...
And it sounds like they just wanted nothing more than to just hide. They just wanted that to go away. Well, they wanted to get on with their lives and they don't seem like, public people. They seem very private. And they just didn't want everyone in their business.
Yeah, just be a normal family, right?
How about your brother? How about Dave? How did you guys get
so
along?
Dave always had this real easiness with my parents. Like he could just, like they were always in sync. And I was that one cog that just didn't fit in, that always kind of, stopped the motor.
How so? How were you sort of different from them?
Well, I looked different. Like Dave looked exactly like my dad. And I didn't. As a matter of fact, when they first found me and they said that I was Paul, one report said that I looked like Dora from the front and Chester from the side, which is kind of
interesting.
A different way to make someone fit a box, right?
I mean, we've all seen families where, we see the family photo and go, oh, okay, these siblings look sort of alike. And there's one over here that, maybe doesn't necessarily look as much as everyone else. And we've all seen those family photos where some people look just alike and some don't.
Even, Emma, my daughter had these school functions, like these dance competitions and things. And whenever we go, and I always see her friends with their parents, I'm like, oh my God, you can totally tell they are exactly their parents' child. I mean, didn't you feel sorry for him? I'm kidding.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
Your fate has been sealed, my friend.
That's a tough deck to get out.
Yeah. But I look back on my old family movies and family pictures. I'm like, oh, that's it's different,
And so, then you feel different, right? Because you don't sort of fit into that same mold.
But once again, it's just, it was just my feelings because I was a normal 10-year-old living with my family.
And when you think about Dave, he was with your parents from the minute he was born. So they raised him, it's that whole nature nurture thing. He was with them as an infant through, as growing up, he knew them through his entire life. And so they were able to have that impact on him. They were able to help him to enjoy the things that they enjoyed. That's what he grew up knowing. And with not knowing what you had experienced for your first 2 years, they're really, like we said, they're trying to get to know you. They're trying to figure out who you are. They've had no impact on you in the first 2 years. So you're going to be different from them. Your experience has been totally different from them.
And isn't it, I think I read somewhere that the first 3 or 4 years of your life pretty much set the tone for the rest of your life.
Yeah. They absolutely can. What your influences are, nature does play a part, but nurture is also very strong. And that's a huge impact on who we become, who raises us, who is our teacher, even from the language that you speak to the culture that you live in, to your mannerisms. People pick up their parents' mannerisms from being with them. So it doesn't surprise me that you felt like an outsider. You weren't exposed to them to be able to absorb who they were as people, what the lifestyle was like. And we just don't know what your first 2 years involved.
And small things like it was a 3-bedroom house. My parents had the master bedroom. Then they had a bigger bedroom. Then they had a tiny little guest room. And even though I was the older brother, I got put in a tiny little guest room with a little tiny twin bed. And Dave, the younger brother, got the big room with the big, full-size bed in there and the big room with all the space. And I always thought that was kind of weird because, I had friends that had younger brothers and they always had the smaller rooms where the older children had, first dibs on the better room.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I did that with my kids. The older one, he got the bigger space. He's older. He's going to do those things first.
Even on the Brady Bunch,
But
that's what
that's
they
interesting.
did, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
So, to me, I took that as like, well, that's got to mean something.
Sure. I mean, and at that point in time, you're probably, you're too young to be aware of it on that sort of higher level of thinking, but it certainly made you think about, I wonder why that is.
Deal,
How come?
Yeah, like I said, Dave always had this easiness with them, and I never really felt that comfortable, and we never really talked about things. It wasn't really a, touchy-feely, express your emotion. Like my daughter, thankfully, tells me everything, and I'm so grateful for that. I didn't tell my parents shit. I mean, I was very secretive.
And like as you were growing up, did you have a job? Were you working? Were you hobbies? Yeah, like what were you like as a teenager?
When I was in grammar school, I started playing guitar for a little bit, and my mom said, "Okay, well, you want to try that? We'll get you some lessons." I did it for a while. I just didn't like it, And then I played clarinet, which was going to go nowhere.
Oh, nerd.
Nobody.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't play Rush on the clarinet, right? But
I'd love to hear you try.
I constantly had strep throat because I never cleaned the reeds out properly, the mouthpiece. My mom was like, "Enough of that. We can't keep caging the doctor for strep throat." So I eventually stopped playing clarinet. I didn't like guitar. So when I mentioned bass, they said, "You're on your own, pal. We tried two things. We're not doing nothing, right? You want this, you do it by yourself." So I had saved money for my job, and I bought a cheap Fender copy bass called a Hondo. It weighed about 75 pounds. It was horrible. The action was, if you know what action is, it was super high. But I learned how to play bass. I taught myself how to play. And out of high school, there were only two bass players that were good, me and this guy named Ray. And Ray was really good, and he taught me a couple of things. But I really learned how to play bass, and that was a sliding door moment for me. Because once again, learning how to play bass took me in a direction that changed my life completely shortly down the road.
And so as you're moving through this high school phase and getting ready to figure out what your next step is in life, what's the atmosphere at home like as you're starting to find your own identity and sort of going in a different direction?
All right, so I'm getting ready to graduate high school. I still haven't forgot about the kidnapping. I still thought about the articles I found about me being the kidnapped child. I had, like I said, I just felt like I just didn't belong. So I had a chance. I was supposed to go to college for business. That's what everyone did after high school. Because
is that what you wanted to do?
No. I signed up. I was going to start college, but then right before high school ended, I was picking up my girlfriend from a restaurant where she worked at. And I heard these two guys talking about, all we need is a bass player and we're ready to roll. I was like, I leaned over, I said, "I'm a bass player." And the guys looked at me like, "Yeah, can you play Rush?" And I said, "Oh, I can play Rush." "Okay, all right, tough guy. We're going to rehearse tomorrow. Here's the address. Show up and let's see what you got." The new Rush album had just come out, and the top single was New World Man. So I learned it that night, showed up the next day, played it, and they said, "That was pretty good. Can you move to Arizona?" I said, "Absolutely. I can move to Arizona."
Didn't even think about it.
No. So that was the easy part. Then I had to go and tell my parents, "I'm not going to college. I'm going to be in a rock and roll band way across the world in Arizona."
And I'm sure that went over really well.
Horrible. Yeah, that was
my God.
That was a dinner conversation that still lives on in infamy. Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, because here you are. They have all these plans for you, and they're thinking, "Yep, he's going to stay on the right track. He's going to do all the right things." And there you go, going right off the rails. And
here's the funny part, right? When I left for Arizona, I never looked back.
Didn't really bother you that much to leave.
I was excited. I was free. I could do what I want. I get to play music.
No more super early curfews. No more. Yeah, you can be able to just do what Paul wants to do. So you moved to Arizona. You had a good run with the band. It sounds like. How long of a run was it?
It lasted about 7 years, and it was great because I grew up in a household that never even listened to music. but I was drawn to it for some reason. Like I said, I taught myself how to play bass, and that's the one constant in my entire life, and I still play bass today. But growing up in a family without music, you wonder, how does someone just have that musicality? So I lasted about 7 years in the band, and then after the band broke up, I just became a wanderer. I just drifted in and out of jobs. I went to Chicago for a while. I joined the Army briefly, got out, got married. I moved to Las Vegas. And that's when, things really got interesting, It's funny, even though the newspaper clippings were in the crawl space, I still kept them with me, and I still have them to this day. So I think it was always in the back of my mind, am I just a regular kid? But that's something everyone thinks about.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden I found myself in Las Vegas. I probably had 100 jobs. I moved at least probably 30 times in my life. I just wandered. I don't know why. It's like I was always searching for something, but I didn't know what it was. I know a lot of people are like that, but I couldn't control it. Like my first marriage, I just walked away, and then
it wasn't hard for you to end your first marriage.
No, it was so amicable. I think we paid like $150, got divorced. Have a good day.
Said no one ever.
Yeah.
It was an amicable divorce. Is there such a thing?
Yeah. I mean,
interesting.
Just moved on, and I dated quite a bit.
Yeah.
And then I moved to California because I was doing a lot of acting stuff, and I met this girl named Michelle, and she happened to live in Las Vegas. I met her at a party in San Diego, and I got booked as George Clooney's stand-in for Ocean's 11.
Nice.
Which was shooting in Vegas. And I had lived in Vegas, right? So I loved Vegas. I just moved to California for a while because I got tired of driving back and forth for auditions. So when Michelle said that she was living in Vegas, I was like, this is fantastic. So I stayed with her while we were shooting the film. And then when it was over, I was like, I think I'm just going to stay back here in Vegas. And we ended up getting married. It was fantastic.
Well, what a normal thing to do.
And I thought, this is it. I can finally settle down. I'm going to stop wandering around. I got a job working for a college as a presenter. It was still an acting gig, but it was steady with benefits, regular hours. Got to travel. I got to go all over the country, which was fantastic. And then one day, Michelle was like, hey, why don't we have a child? I was like, that's a great idea. I never thought about that.
Sure,
I'm in my
that.
40s by now at this point. I thought I'd never have children.
Right.
And all of a sudden she's like, well, let's try. Boom. All of a sudden she's pregnant. Right? I was like, this is cool. I really wanted to have a girl. I was a boy, and I know how boys are growing up, and I was like, what? Let's have a girl. It'd be much better journey for me. So of course, if you manifest it, you make it true. We had the ultrasound, and sure enough, she said, you're having a girl.
Baby
and
girl.
Michelle will tell you, I ran around that room screaming. I was so excited. I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a dad to a daughter. And everything was cool. Everything was great. I was so excited. And then we went into the doctor's office, routine, ultrasound check, stuff like that. And then they asked me a question that I've heard my whole life. What's your medical history? Which everyone has asked. And
especially with you're having a baby. Yeah.
Right.
The doctors want to know.
So I started spouting off the thing I was always told, mom and dad, whatever, what I thought was my history. And then those newspaper clippings came back in my mind. And I started thinking, what if by chance I'm really not that kidnapped child, Paul, from Chicago? I think I should find out, because I think I'm doing a disservice to my new daughter. I'm not being genuine. What if I have a medical condition? What if I'm really not this guy? There's got to be a way I could find out. So one day I was in the CVS, and I'm walking down the aisle, and it's like a bright spotlight just shone on this one product. It was an Identigene paternity kit. It was like the universe was pushing me towards that item. So I picked it up, and I found myself walking towards the counter with it. I set it down. So Tracy, what do you think? Is that a good place to leave?
I think that's a great place to leave it. Again, a sliding door moment, right?
Sliding door moment. So if
you're gonna buy it, are you gonna do it? Are you not gonna do it?
Yeah.
We'll find out.
Yeah. So if you want to find out what happens next, make sure you tune in for the next episode. We're only getting started. Tracy, always a pleasure.
As well as with you, Paul.
I'll see you next week.
Thanks so much for listening. All right. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
The Fronczak Files is created and hosted by Paul Jack Fronczak. Co-hosted by me, Tracy Hastings. Edited by Gavin Bogner. Lead genetic genealogist, Emily Ripper. Lead historical researcher, Colleen Newhart. Social media manager, Amy Morris. Original theme music written and produced by Paul Jack Fronczak and Rick Howland. Thank you for joining us on the journey, and please remember to subscribe.